Hi, this is going to be the lecture for the Tuesday class. I know I'm a little late on getting this out, but hopefully better than nothing. Okay, so the first part of it, we went over the history of human resource law. So, you can kind of read some of this off the slide, but I'm going to talk about it a little bit. 1963 Equal Pay Act. What it is pretty self-explanatory, I'd like to think, and that it is make sure you're getting equal pay for equal work. But the reasons for it are more historical than you might think. Obviously, there's always been men making more for the same work. Arguments out there, but the thing is that used to be codified. That used to actually be the law, as weird as that may sound. It used to be that, for example, with teachers, it was the law that male teachers made about twice what female teachers made. And it wasn't that they were trying to be mean per se. It actually made sense within its own context, but no sense by the time by 1963, when this was being passed. So the deal was that these laws were made out west, because out west people came out to farm, but there wasn't very many jobs that didn't involve working on the farm. So there really wasn't enough jobs. Okay, so, unless you had your own place, there really wasn't enough jobs. So what do you do when there's not enough jobs? Well, one thing you do is make sure that the right people are getting those jobs. And what we mean by that is the right people are not getting the jobs might be a better way of terming that. If you were a young woman and you were single, you could get a teaching job, and that would be fine. And you were only supporting yourself. Okay? If you got married, believe it or not, that was actually a fireable offense. Now that sounds like weird, right? But the idea is that if you got married, then your husband would have some sort of a job. Husband would either be, farming or have some other job, and that he would be able to support the family. Therefore, it didn't make sense for one family to have two jobs when a lot of other families didn't have any jobs at all. So, fireable offense, you'd no longer be retained. You'd be expected to stay home. You'd be expected to take care of your husband, have kids, and that would be just kind of what everybody thought would happen. And the reason there was no, rebellion from that is that made sense to people. Whereas if you were a man getting a teaching job, it was expected that you were probably married, and that you were supporting a family. So therefore, the idea is that a man might be supporting at least two, probably more like 3, 4, 5, or 6 people, whereas a woman in the same job would only be supporting one. And it made perfect sense to everybody that the man should get paid more than the woman, not because he was doing a better job, but because he had more people to support. Okay? Made sense in 1880. Didn't make sense by 1960, when when these things had changed. Yet the laws persisted all the way through the 20s, when they really stopped being true, and then 40 years later into the 60s. So finally, Equal Pay Law Act is passed, and those laws are out. Okay? A year later, the Title VII, which created the protected classes, and that means you couldn't be fired for your marital status, your race, your gender, your country of origin, and one more, your ethnicity. Age was added to that so that you couldn't be 3 years later fired for being 40 or more. And some special protections for women who are pregnant were added in 1978. The Americans with Disabilities Act protected the disabled. That came 12 years after that, in 1990, and was rather major. And in 91, the Civil Rights Act was passed. Now, you may say, well, if you already have the protected classes and you can't fire somebody based off of race or ethnicity, why do you need the Civil Rights Act? Well, what the Civil Rights Act did was allowed what's called compensatory damages. So, in the law passed in 1964 might get you your job back, But the law passed in 1991 is going to get you extra money because something unjust was done to you. And then in 1993, the Federal Family and Medical Leave Act, and that's the one that allows us to take paternity leave, maternity leave, when babies, and in any company larger than 50, and we have to be able to do it. Many companies already did, but this made it the law. Okay. So what does a human resource person do? Number one, they do planning. Okay? And what's meant by that is that they keep the organization's training needs and needs for staff in mind as they're looking into the future. They also do job analysis. They're making sure that the right people are doing the right jobs and they have the right qualifications. It's their job to kind of follow up on that. And number three, they're a recruiter. They're the ones putting the stuff in the newspaper, calling on people, trying to find people for the work. You as a supervisor may be doing that, but HR is supposed to be heading up that effort, and that's part of their responsibilities. Okay, they're also responsible for training and development. Now, sometimes this is classroom instruction, like a class like this, and true enough, this class came directly from the UIC HR and Northfield Borough HR meeting and thinking, what can we put together? Okay. They're also supposed to oversee the on-the-job training and ensuring that people have a variety of work experiences, sometimes called cross-training. And what I mean by that is that you don't get in a position where only one person in a company knows how to do something, and therefore, if that person gets sick or if that person quits, then there's nobody in the company who knows how to do that. Okay, so they're the ones supposed to be making sure that the company doesn't get in that position. Okay, they're also responsible for the feedback mechanisms. Okay, now this can take a variety of different types. First of all, we're talking about performance appraisals, traits-based, behavior-based, and results-based. What's meant by that is a traits-based approval means, do you have the ability to do your job? And is it within your grasp? Assuming you can, then behavior-based might be more relevant. And that's, do you act in a way, do your behaviors correspond to someone who does this job? Those are pretty uncommon. Usually you see those at the very beginning of a job. Someone will be given some sort of an assessment to make sure that they're basic. Or you'll sometimes even see it's part of the application process where people will take a traits test and a behavior test to make sure they're going to fit. Really what you see more often these days in works is results-based. How good are you at your job? How well have you done it? What's the outcome been? The 1 to 5 scale or 1 to 7 scale, various things that are part of the job. Your work ethic and your integrity and how much work you get done and so on and so forth. Okay? And those types fall into two different, objective and subjective. Objective is anything that's either true or false, okay, either true or false, or something that can be measured with a number. Anything that is not either true or false or can't be measured with a number isn't objective. So for example, how good was your dinner last night? Well, that's not a true or false question, and a number would be kind of an awkward way of answering that. So it's not objective. Subjective is everything else. This is everything where an opinion comes into play. Okay? So objective, true or false, or number-based. Subjective, opinion-based. Okay? Who should do appraisals? This is something else that people struggle with. HR struggle with. A lot of times, especially on the borough, up in the borough, here at the Lasavic or city, that you'll do a self-assessment, okay, and your supervisor also assesses you, and those are, most people are pretty comfortable with those. Makes sense. Your boss, rate how good you're doing. You should rate how good yourself is doing, because you may find areas that you can improve. Two others to consider are peers, having other people in your department that you don't work for evaluate you because they see you in a different light. You're not always trying to impress them in the same way that you are for a supervisor, and even having clients evaluate you. And why that makes sense is they are the ones who are actually receiving the consequences of your effort. The people that who are using your business, we use them in our classes. We have that paper that we pass out, and people say how good the class was. So a client evaluation also makes sense. Okay. They're also HR is also responsible for pay and benefit packages. Okay, and there's two parts to the pay. First of all, you look at the pay levels, and what that means is how much do we pay versus what do other organizations pay for the same job. Do we want to be the highest? Do we, maybe try to attract the best staff? Do we want to be the lowest? Do we want to save money? Do we want to align ourselves so we're kind of exactly in the same spot as everyone else? That's a question. So they're looking at the pay levels. Okay? They're also looking at what's called the pay structure, and that's comparing one job in the company to another. There should be some sort of the importance of the job to the company, some sort of relationship between those two ideas. That the more important the job is to the company, the more it gets paid. So pay levels, that's between companies, and pay structure, that's evaluating where different salaries rank within the company. They're also the ones that are thinking about benefits. Okay, most companies up on the North Slope have what's called a fixed, and that means that everybody from the highest rank on down get basically the same benefit package. The same health insurance, the same number of days off. Sure, people who've been there longer get more days off, but there's a schedule to it. It doesn't depend on what job you have. Okay, that same. That if we're doing a tuition discount, that applies to everybody who works for the company. The other type, you don't see this too much up on the North Slope, and I've really only worked at one company that had it, was something called a cafeteria style, and that's where you get a certain amount to spend on your benefits, and you get to pick which benefits you want. Maybe you are, maybe you're young and you're single, and so you don't need glasses, so you're not going to choose the vision, and you want to put more into your retirement. Or maybe you're older with kids and you have a lot of kids who have glasses, and you want to put have the best vision coverage possible with your company. That you're maybe more time off is more important to you. That you can kind of choose within reason which benefits you want to have and which ones you don't want to have, and you have a certain amount of money to spend on them. You don't get to keep the extra money, but you do get to use it to select what you want and what you don't want.